shoe is an item of footwear intended to protect and comfort the human foot while doing various activities. Shoes are also used as an item of decoration. The design of shoes has varied enormously through time and from culture to culture, with appearance originally being tied to function. Additionally, fashion has often dictated many design elements, such as whether shoes have very high heels or flat ones. Contemporary footwear varies widely in style, complexity, and cost. Basic sandals may consist of only a thin sole and simple strap. High-fashion shoes may be made of very expensive materials in complex construction and sell for thousands of dollars a pair. Other shoes are for very specific purposes, such as boots designed specifically for mountaineering or skiing. Traditionally, shoes have been made from leather, wood or canvas, but are increasingly made from rubber, plastics, and other petrochemical-derived materials, though it has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in relation to vastly varied terrain and climate conditions. The human foot is still vulnerable to environmental hazards such as sharp rocks and hot ground, against which shoes can protect. History. Antiquity. The earliest known shoes are sandals dating from approximately 7000 or 8000 BC, found in the Fort Rock Cave in the U.S. state of Oregon in 1938. The world's oldest leather shoe, made from a single piece of cowhide laced with a leather cord along seams at the front and back, was found in the Areni-1 cave complex in Armenia in 2008 and is believed to date to 3500 BC. Otzi the Iceman's shoes, dating to 3300 BC, featured brown bearskin bases, deerskin side panels, and a bark string net, which pulled tight around the foot. The Jotunheimen shoe was discovered in August 2006. Archaeologists estimate that the leather shoe was made between 1800 and 1100 BC, making it the oldest article of clothing discovered in Scandinavia. It is thought that shoes may have been used long before this, but because the materials used were highly perishable, it is difficult to find evidence of the earliest footwear. By studying the bones of the smaller toes, it was observed that the thickness decreased approximately 40,000 to 26,000 years ago. This led archaeologists to deduce that wearing shoes resulted in less bone growth, resulting in shorter, thinner toes. These earliest designs were very simple in design, are often mere footbags of leather to protect the feet from rocks, debris, and cold. They were more commonly found in colder climates. Many early natives in North America wore a similar type of footwear, known as the moccasin. These are tight-fitting, soft-soled shoes typically made out of leather or bison hides. Many moccasins were also decorated with various beads and other adornments. Moccasins were not designed to be waterproof, and in wet weather and warm summer months, most Native Americans went barefoot. As civilizations began to develop, thong sandals were worn. This practice dates back to pictures of them in ancient Egyptian murals from 4000 BC. One pair found in Europe was made of papyrus leaves and dated to be approximately 1,500 years old. They were also worn in Jerusalem during the 1st century of the Common Era. Thong sandals were worn by many civilizations and made from a wide variety of materials. Ancient Egyptian sandals were made from papyrus and palm leaves. The Maasai of Africa made them out of rawhide. In India they were made from wood. In China and Japan, rice straw was used. The leaves of the sisal plant were used to make twine for sandals in South America, while the natives of Mexico used the yucca plant. While thong sandals were commonly worn, many people in ancient times, such as the Egyptians, Hindus and Greeks, saw little need for footwear. and most of the time, preferred being barefoot. The Egyptians and Hindus made some use of ornamental footwear, such as a soleless sandal known as a Cleopatra, which did not provide any practical protection for the foot. The ancient Greeks largely viewed footwear as self-indulgent, unaesthetic and unnecessary. Shoes were primarily worn in the theatre as a means of increasing stature, and many preferred to go barefoot. Athletes in the ancient Olympic Games participated barefoot and naked. Even the gods and heroes were primarily depicted barefoot, and the hoplite warriors fought battles in bare feet, and Alexander the Great conquered his vast empire with barefoot armies. The runners of ancient Greece are also believed to have run barefoot. Pheidippides, the first marathoner, ran from Athens to Sparta in less than 36 hours. After the Battle of Marathon, he ran straight from the battlefield to Athens to inform the Athenians of the news. The Romans, who eventually conquered the Greeks and adopted many aspects of the culture, did not adopt the Greek perception of footwear and clothing. Roman clothing was seen as a sign of power, and footwear was seen as a necessity of living in a civilized world. Although the slaves and paupers usually went barefoot, Roman soldiers were issued with chiral footwear. There are references to shoes being worn in the Bible, Middle Ages and early modern period. A common casual shoe in the Pyrenees during the Middle Ages were espadrilles. These are sandals with braided jute soles and a fabric upper portion, and often includes fabric laces that tie around the ankle. The term is French and comes from the esparto grass. The shoes originate in the Catalonian region of Spain as early as the 13th century, and were commonly worn by peasants in the farming communities in the area. Many medieval shoes were made using the turn shoe method of construction, in which the upper was turned flesh side out, and was lasted onto the sole and joined to the edge by a seam. The shoe was then turned inside out so that the grain was outside. Some shoes were developed with toggled flaps or drawstrings to tighten the leather around the foot for a better fit. Surviving medieval turn shoes often fit the foot closely, with the right and left shoe being mirror images. The turn shoe method was replaced by the welted method around 1500. By the 15th century, patterns became popular by both men and women in Europe. These are commonly seen as the predecessor of the modern high-heeled shoe, while the poor and lower classes in Europe, as well as slaves in the New World, were barefoot. In the 15th century, the Krakow was fashionable in Europe. This style of shoe is named because it is thought to have originated in Kraków, the capital of Poland. The style is characterized by the point of the shoe, known as the pollen, which often was supported by a whalebone tied to the knee to prevent the point getting in the way while walking. Also during the 15th century, chopines were created in Turkey, and were usually 7 to 8 inches high. These shoes became popular in Venice and throughout Europe, as a status symbol revealing wealth and social standing. During the 16th century, royalty started wearing high-heeled shoes to make them look taller and larger than life, such as Catherine de' Medici and Mary I of England. By 1580, even men wore them, and a person with authority or wealth was often referred to as well-heeled. Eventually the modern shoe, with a sewn-on sole, was devised. Since the 17th century, most leather shoes have used a sewn-on sole. This remains the standard for finer quality dress shoes today. Until around 1800, welted round shoes were commonly made without differentiation for the left or right foot. Such shoes are now referred to as straights. Only gradually did the modern foot-specific shoe become standard. Industrial-era shoemaking became more commercialized in the mid-18th century, as it expanded as a cottage industry. Large warehouses began to stock footwear in warehouses, made by many small manufacturers from the area. Until the 19th century, shoemaking was a traditional handicraft, but by the century's end, the process had been almost completed completely mechanized, with production occurring in large factories. Despite the obvious economic gains of mass production, the factory system produced shoes without the individual differentiation that the traditional shoemaker was able to provide. The first steps towards mechanization were taken during the Napoleonic Wars by the engineer Marc Brunel. He developed machinery for the mass production of boots from the soldiers of the British Army. In 1812 he devised a scheme for making nailed boot-making machinery that automatically fastened soles to uppers by means of metallic pins or nails. With the support of the Duke of York, the shoes were manufactured, and, due to the strength, cheapness, and durability, were introduced for the use of the army. In the same year, the use of screws and staples was patented by Richard Woodman. Brunel's system was described by Sir Richard Phillips as a visitor to his factory in Battersea as follows. In another building I was shown his manufactory of shoes, which, like the other, is full of ingenuity, and, in regard to subdivision of labor, brings this fabric on a level with the oft-admired manufactory of pins. Every step in it is effected by the most elegant and precise machinery, while, as each operation is performed by one hand, so each shoe passes through 25 hands, who complete from the hide, as supplied by the courier, 100 pairs of strong and well-finished shoes per day. All the details are performed by the ingenious application of the mechanic powers, and all the parts are characterized by precision, uniformity, and accuracy, as each man performs but one step in the process, which implies no knowledge of what is done by those who go before or follow him. So the persons employed are not shoemakers, but wounded soldiers, who are able to learn the respective duties in a few hours. The contract at which these shoes are delivered to government is 6s. 6d. per pair, being at least 2s less than what was paid previously for an unequal and cobbled article. Quote, however, when the war ended in 1815, manual labor became much cheaper, and the demand for military equipment subsided. As a consequence, Brunel's system was no longer profitable and it soon ceased business. Similar exigencies at the time of the Crimean War stimulated a renewed interest in methods of mechanization and mass production, which proved longer lasting. A shoemaker in Leicester, Thomas Crick, patented the design for a riveting machine in 1853. His machine used an iron plate to push iron rivets into the sole. The process greatly increased the speed and efficiency of production. He also introduced the use of steam-powered rolling machines for hardening leather and cutting machines. In the mid-1850s, the sewing machine was introduced in 1846, and provided an alternative method for the mechanization of shoemaking. By the late 1850s, the industry was beginning to shift towards the modern factory, mainly in the US and areas of England. The shoe stitching machine was invented by the American Lyman Blake in 1856 and perfected by 1864. Entering into partnership with Mackay, his device became known as the Mackay stitching machine and was quickly adopted by manufacturers throughout New England. As bottlenecks opened up in the production line due to these innovations, more and more of the manufacturing stages, such as pegging and finishing, became automated. By the 1890s, the process of mechanization was largely complete. Since the mid-20th century, advances in rubber, plastics, synthetic cloth, and industrial adhesives have allowed manufacturers to create shoes that stray considerably from traditional crafting techniques. Leather, which had been the primary material in earlier styles, has remained standard in expensive dress shoes, but athletic shoes often have little or no real leather. Soles, which were once laboriously hand-stitched on, are now more often machine-stitched or simply glued on. Many of these newer materials, such as rubber and plastics, have made shoes less biodegradable. It is estimated that most mass-produced shoes require 1,000 years to degrade in a landfill. In the late 2000s, some shoemakers picked up on the issue and began to produce shoes made entirely from degradable materials, such as the Nike considered. In 2007, the global shoe industry had an overall market of $107.4 billion in terms of revenue, and is expected to grow to $122.9 billion by the end of 2012. Shoe manufacturers in the People's Republic of China account for 63% of production, 40.5% of global exports and 55% of industry revenue. However, many manufacturers in Europe dominate the higher-priced, higher-value-added end of the market. Culture and folklore as an integral part of human culture and civilization, shoes have found the way into our culture, folklore, and art. A popular 18th-century nursery rhyme is "There was an old woman who lived in a shoe." This story tells about an old woman living in a shoe with a lot of children. In 1948, Marlon Haynes, a shoe salesman in Hallam, Pennsylvania, built an actual house shaped like a work boot as a form of advertisement. The Haynes Shoe House was rented to newlyweds and the elderly until his death in 1962. Since then, it has served as an ice cream parlor, a bed and breakfast, and a museum. It still stands today and is a popular roadside attraction. Shoes also play an important role in the fairy tales Cinderella and the Red Shoes. In the movie adaptation of the children's book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, a pair of red ruby slippers play a key role in the plot. The 1985 comedy The Man with One Red Shoe features an eccentric man wearing one normal business shoe and one red shoe that becomes central to the plot. Athletic sneaker collection has also existed as a part of urban subculture in the United States for several decades. Recent decades have seen this trend spread to European nations such as the Czech Republic. A sneakerhead is a person who owns multiple pairs of shoes as a form of collection and fashion. A contributor to the growth of sneaker collecting is the continued worldwide popularity of the Air Jordan line of sneakers designed by Nike for basketball star Michael Jordan. In the Holy Bible's Old Testament, the shoe is used to symbolize something that is worthless or of little value. In the New Testament, the act of removing one's shoes symbolizes servitude. Ancient Semitic-speaking peoples regarded the act of removing the shoes as a mark of reverence when approaching a sacred person or place. In the book of Exodus, Moses was instructed to remove his shoes before approaching the burning bush. "Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest, holy ground." The removal of the shoe also symbolizes the act of giving up a legal right. In Hebrew custom, the widow removed the shoe of her late husband's brother to symbolize that he had abandoned his duty. In Arab custom, the removal of one's shoe also symbolized the dissolution of marriage. In Arab culture, showing the sole of one's shoe is considered an insult, and to throw a shoe and hit someone with it is considered an even greater insult. Shoes are considered to be dirty as they frequently touch the ground, and are associated with the lowest part of the body, the foot. As such, shoes are forbidden in mosques, and it is also considered unmannerly to cross the legs and display the soles of one's shoes to someone when talking to them. This insult was demonstrated in Iraq, first when Saddam Hussein's statue was toppled in 2003. Iraqis gathered around it and struck the statue with their shoes. Secondly, in 2008, United States President George W. Bush had a shoe thrown at him by a journalist as a statement against the war that was brought to Iraq and the lives that it has cost. More generally, shoe throwing, the shoeing, showing the sole of one's shoe, or using shoes to insult are forms of protest in many parts of the world. Incidents where shoes were thrown at political figures have taken place in Australia, India, Ireland, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Pakistan, the United Kingdom, the United States, and most notably the Arab world. Empty shoes may also symbolize death. In Greek culture, empty shoes are the equivalent of the American funeral wreath. For example, empty shoes placed outside of a Greek home would tell others that the family's son has died in battle. At an observation memorializing the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, 3,000 pairs of empty shoes were used to recognize those killed. The shoes on the Danube bank is a memorial in Budapest, Hungary, conceived by film director Kantogai. He created it on the east bank of the Danube River with sculptor Gyula Power to honor the Jews who were killed by fascist Arrow Cross militiamen in Budapest during World War II. They were ordered to take off the shoes, and were shot at the edge of the water so that their bodies fell into the river and were carried away. The memorial represents the shoes left behind on the bank. Shoe construction. The basic anatomy of a shoe is recognizable, regardless of the specific style of footwear. All shoes have a sole, which is the bottom of a shoe, in contact with the ground. Soles can be made from a variety of materials, although most modern shoes have soles made from natural rubber, polyurethane, or polyvinyl chloride compounds. Soles can be simple, of single material in a single layer, or they can be complex, with multiple structures, layers and materials. When various layers are used, soles may consist of an insole, midsole, and an outsole. The insole is the interior bottom of a shoe, which sits directly beneath the foot under the footbed. The purpose of insole is to attach to the lasting margin of the upper, which is wrapped around the last during the closing of the shoe during the lasting operation. Insoles are usually made of cellulosic paperboard or synthetic non-woven insole board. Many shoes have removable and replaceable footbeds. Extra cushioning is often added for comfort or health reasons. The outsole is the layer in direct contact with the ground. Dress shoes often have leather or resin rubber outsoles. Casual or work-oriented shoes have outsoles made of natural rubber or a synthetic material, like polyurethane. The outsole may comprise a single piece, or may be an assembly of separate pieces, often of different materials. On some shoes, the heel of the sole has a rubber plate for durability and traction, while the front is leather for style. Specialized shoes will often have modifications on this design. Athletic called cleated shoes like soccer, rugby, baseball and golf shoes have spikes embedded in the outsole to improve traction. The midsole is the layer in between the outsole and the insole, typically for shock absorption. Some types of shoes, like running shoes, have additional material for shock absorption, usually beneath the heel of the foot, where one puts the most pressure down. Some shoes may not have a midsole at all. The heel is the bottom rear part of a shoe. Its function is to support the heel of the foot. They are often made of the same material as the sole of the shoe. This part can be high for fashion or to make the person look taller, or flat for a more practical and comfortable use. On some shoes the inner forward point of the heel is chiseled off, a feature known as a gentleman's corner. This piece of design is intended to alleviate the problem of the points catching the bottom of trousers and was first observed in the 1930s. The upper helps hold the shoe onto the foot. In the simplest cases, such as sandals or flip-flops, this may be nothing more than a few straps for holding the sole in place. Closed footwear, such as boots, trainers and most men's shoes, will have a more complex upper. This part is often decorated or is made in a certain style to look attractive. The upper is connected to the sole by a strip of leather, rubber, or plastic that is stitched between it and the sole, known known as a well. Most uppers have a mechanism, such as laces, straps with buckles, zippers, elastic, Velcro straps, buttons, or snaps, for tightening the upper on the foot. Uppers with laces usually have a tongue that helps seal the laced opening and protect the foot from abrasion by the laces. Uppers with laces also have eyelets or hooks to make it easier to tighten and loosen the laces and to prevent the lace from tearing through the upper material. An aglet is the protective wrapping on the end of the lace. The vamp is the front part of the shoe, starting behind the toe, extending around the eyelets and tongue and towards back part of the shoe. The medial is the part of the shoe closest to a person's center of symmetry, and the lateral is on the opposite side, away from the center of symmetry. This can be in reference to either the outsole of the vamp. Most shoes have shoelaces on the upper, connecting the medial and lateral parts after one puts the shoes on and aiding in keeping the shoes on the feet. In 1968, Pumache introduced the first pair of sneakers with Velcro straps in lieu of shoelaces, and these became popular by the 1980s, especially among children and the elderly. The toe box is the part that covers and protects the toes. People with toe deformities, or individuals who experience toe swelling, usually require a larger toe box.